Have you noticed that all the great Batman villains have excellent origin stories? Think about it. Two-Face, the Riddler, Bane, and even the Joker to some extent. They all have extraordinary backgrounds. That said, there is one Batman villain that has the undisputable best origin in terms of storytelling. It is Ra's al Ghul, the Demon, one of the most formidable and dangerous enemies of the Batman. Ra's al Ghul was created in 1971 by editor Julius Schwartz, writer Denny O'Neil, and artist Neil Adams, and even though he was introduced as a major new enemy, his origin story was not revealed in his initial storyline. In fact, the origin of Ra's al Ghul was first told 20 years after his first appearance. In 1992, DC Comics published Batman: Birth of the Demon, a graphic novel written by the co-creator of Ra's al Ghul, Denny O'Neil, and illustrated by the fan-favorite Norm Breyfogle. Birth of the Demon was the last story of the Demon trilogy that began in 1987 with Batman, Son of the Demon, and was later followed in 1990 by Batman, Bride of the Demon. They were written by Mike Barr, the Batman writer that nobody really likes to talk about. Son of the Demon was the story where Damian Wayne was sort of created, but it was ignored until Grant Morrison happened. Bride of the Demon, on the other hand, is just a weak attempt to tell a Ra's al Ghul story. The fact is that after the first Ra's al Ghul storyline in the Bronze Age, every other story featuring the demon was forgettable. And I think that part of the reason why nobody else could come up with good Ra's al Ghul stories is because the origin of the character was a mystery. Characters like Two-Face, Mr. Freeze, Poison Ivy, or Scarecrow have clear origins that allow the writers to understand the motivations of the characters. Now, the motivations of Raish were clear, his desire to cleanse the earth and start a new world, but the reason behind that motivation was not clear. What made him what he is? How did Ra's al Ghul got his longevity? Where did he come from? These are all the important questions that Denny O'Neil set out to answer in Batman: Birth of the Demon. I started reading this book knowing perfectly well that this was going to be an origin story. However, I couldn't foresee the magnitude of this massive storytelling effort. I am not exaggerating when I say that Birth of the Demon is Denny O'Neil and Norm Breyfogle's magnum opus. Birth of the Demon is close to 130 pages, twice as long as Son of the Demon and the longest Batman one-shot up until then. Denny O'Neil and Norm Breyfogle went all out in this one and delivered their best work. This is a story of epic proportions, probably the most epic Batman story that I have read. It begins with Batman investigating the latest activities of Ra's al Ghul and his attempts to find a new Lazarus Pit. Batman has foiled all of his attempts, but in the last one, he is attacked and falls into a river of toxic waste. Now Batman has to continue his mission with poison inside his body. Having Batman poisoned with toxic waste encapsulates both the themes of the story as well as the ideals of the writer. Denny O'Neil was always an advocate for social justice, and he was always concerned about the pollution of the planet. He included this character trait into Ra's al Ghul, a character that has a little bit of Denny. As it turns out, Ra's al Ghul is looking for a new Lazarus Pit because he doesn't have much time left. Although we never see him, it's pretty obvious that his health has declined dramatically. Raish and Talia have no choice but to go back to the place where everything started, the location of the first Lazarus Pit. Meanwhile, Batman deduces their next move and he gets ready to travel all the way to the African desert. Alfred is concerned about Bruce's health, as he is clearly getting worse because of the toxins in his body, but Bruce is determined to stop Ra's al Ghul once and for all. Bruce knows that Raish needs the pit to rejuvenate himself once again, and he wants to stop that. Bruce wants Ra's al Ghul to finally die of natural causes. Denny O'Neil always liked to write stories with Batman outside of Gotham, and this one is no exception. Batman travels to Africa, where he meets Talia in the middle of nowhere, close to the Lazarus Pit, on the exact same spot where Ra's al Ghul was born. Talia wants to know how Batman found her so quickly, And he explains that thanks to his investigations, he found an ancient manuscript that tells the life story of Ra's al Ghul. Now this is where the origin of Raish begins, and they take us back to the ancient world to witness the birth of the demon. Years later, as an adult, Raish served as a doctor, a physician for a sultan and his kingdom. Raish had a wife called Sora, whom he loved beyond words because she gave meaning to his life. Ra's al Ghul chose a career as a physician, a doctor, to save lives. He did that because he thought that death was mankind's greatest enemy, and he would do anything to defy and conquer death. One day, Raish was asked to heal the son of the Sultan, who was dying. Raish used all of his scientific knowledge to create the first Lazarus pit. It was dug in the same place where he was born, and he used chemicals that would be deadly for any person under any other circumstances. The experiment was a success. The son of the Sultan lived, but as he came out of the pit, he was raving mad. He assaulted everyone in the place and strangled Sora to death. A few minutes later, he came to his senses, and the Sultan put the blame of the attack and the death of the woman on the physician. Raish was betrayed by the people he had sworn to protect, and the love of his life was killed as a result of his experiment. The experience changed him, and after he escaped from the Sultan's dreadful punishment, he returned for revenge. Ra's al Ghul joined a tribe of nomads, and with their help, he brought the downfall of the Sultan and the city. They slaughtered everyone, burning the whole place to the ground and destroying everything. A whole civilization was wiped out. Their knowledge, their language, everything was gone. Following that, Raish contracted a deadly plague, and he used the Lazarus pit to heal himself for the first time. After that moment, the physician was dead, and Ra's al Ghul was born. To mark the occasion, he desecrated the altar of a demon that his people used to worship. He removed the head of the statue, and he became the new head of the demon. Ra's al Ghul continued to live as the centuries passed by. He would always find new places to create Lazarus pits, and every time after he used one of them, he would be filled with savage joy, knowing that he had defeated death. Batman doesn't buy that story, and his conversation with Talia is quite a touching moment that provides further background to the history of Talia. Here we learn that Talia is in her 20s and that she has never used a Lazarus pit, unlike it was suggested in some past stories. Her mother was a woman that Raish met at Woodstock of all places. She died of a drug overdose, and all of this contradicts the story in Son of the Demon, which at this point is anything but canon. The Woodstock stuff and the drug references can feel a bit out of place, but it makes sense when you realize it's all a nod to Denny O'Neil's own wild past. At this point of the story, Denny delivers the greatest piece of characterization of Batman, of Talia and Ra's al Ghul. Denny draws parallels between Batman and Raish, showing us that they both share a mad obsession. They are only different faces of the same coin. Talia offers Batman an exit to that torment, but once again she is in the middle of the struggle between two unstoppable forces. From the shadows comes Ra's al Ghul, who has been listening and waiting for the right moment. He is old, the oldest that we have ever seen him. He tries to reason with Batman, but the Dark Knight won't budge. The calm and silence of the desert is replaced by a storm as the most epic standoff is about to begin. Thunder and rain surround them, and the fiery wind enlarges the burning fire next to the pit. These are two primal forces fighting each other relentlessly. The body of Raish is old, but Batman is weak because of the poison inside of him. The fight is vicious, with both of them using all they have, hurting each other and burning themselves with fire. This is a fight to the death. The stamina and youth of Batman gets him the upper hand, but only for a moment. Ra's al Ghul strikes back with a shovel and knocks Batman down. Using that same weapon, Rage stabs Batman in the chest with one swift but definitive movement. The fight is not over. Bruce rises up with the shovel stuck in his chest, and with ungodly, inhuman strength, he grabs Ra's al Ghul, and the two of them fall into the Lazarus Pit. The night goes by and the Lazarus Pit is covered with sand. In the morning, when the storm has passed, Bruce comes out of it, his body completely healed, and his opponent nowhere to be found. He picks up a shovel and starts digging, trying to find a trace of Ra's al Ghul. The only thing he finds is his own cape and cowl, but underneath that, he unravels the head of the demon. Knowing that he has defeated death, Batman is filled with savage joy. I was not exaggerating when I said that this is Denny O'Neil and Norm Breyfogle's masterpiece. This is the culmination of every Ra's al Ghul story, the grand finale to the saga of the demon. This feels like the most epic Batman movie that was never made. Denny O'Neil outdid himself in this book. This is one of his last major writing projects, and he crafted an epic tale for the ages. Nobody has ever come close to create a more authentic and spectacular story with Ra's al Ghul. And that's only natural, considering he is the main creator of the character. In this book, Denny O'Neil makes a connection between Batman and Ra's al Ghul that didn't exist before. Batman and Rage are both equals. They are men of science, with noble goals and ideals that are twisted by the tragedy of their past. The same tragedy that makes them extremely determined to achieve their goal. This connection between Batman and Ra's al Ghul is a symbolic representation of the connection that Denny O'Neil feels with Rage, the character that he created, as well as with Batman, the character that he embraced as his own. This connection is most evident at the end of the story, when Denny O'Neil draws parallels between Batman and Rage after they come out of the Lazarus Pit, feeling joy, knowing that they have defeated death itself. The writing is so clever that the moment when Batman finds his cape and cowl with the head of the demon inside has many layers of symbolism. Textually, this is the evidence that Batman needs to convince himself that the story from the manuscript is real. Subtextually, this moment symbolizes the fact that Batman came first and that Ra's al Ghul was created from within the Batman mythos. Birth of the Demon is the definitive origin story of Ra's al Ghul, and it should be the template for every Ra's al Ghul story. But for some reason, it isn't. Every modern Ra's al Ghul story can never get past the gimmicks of the assassins, the Lazarus Pits, and the shirtless Batman fights in the desert. There is so much more to Ra's al Ghul than just gimmicks, and all the character traits, all the details are laid out in this story. Now, I can't end this video without praising the art. Birth of the Demon is a story that would not have worked without Norm Breyfogle. The art of Norm in this book is out of this world. Starting with the cover, which is an actual painting on canvas, the entire book's art was done using mixed media such as pencils, inks, paint, and various different brushes and knives. Norm Breyfogle was already a solid illustrator and an iconic Batman artist, but with this story, he went above and beyond the wildest expectations. Norm Breyfogle was an expressionist artist, which means that his art enhances the expressions and provides a sense of magnificence to every place, character, and item in the story, and this is exactly what a tale of this magnitude required. The art emphasizes the feelings, thoughts, and expressions of the characters by contrasting light and darkness, shapes and lines, characters, and backgrounds. In other words, the art of this book complements the writing that puts so much emphasis on the characterization and builds empathy towards the reader. I simply couldn't stop admiring the excellent craftsmanship in the art of the book. The attention to detail in every single panel made it feel like they were all their own painted illustrations. The composition of each panel and the layout of the pages was mind-bending, and the careful color choices in every brushstroke that was used effectively to enhance the narrative creates a dynamic flow and a unique and satisfying reading experience. And that's the bottom line. Batman Birth of the Demon is an experience, one that you are missing out on if you haven't read this book, and one that I will surely never forget. I honestly hope that you enjoyed this video, and I cannot stress enough the fact that you must read this story for yourself, because there is no way that I can do it justice with a video. Birth of the Demon is my dream come true, my favorite Batman writer with my favorite Batman artist. Now that I think of it, I may be biased on this review, which is why you should read it and decide for yourself. As always, a special thanks to my patrons for sponsoring this video and to all of you who watch until the end. You guys make me proud. Also remember that you can follow me on Twitter at Salazar. Friends, thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you next time.